Good evening. Call to order the regular meeting of the Board of Education for Wednesday, March 24th, 2021. Will everyone please rise for the pledge to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Michael Ciarello is not joining us this evening, and Suzanne Donahue and Don Beeler are just running a little bit late. A reading of our mission statement. We are committed to academic achievement and success for all students in a safe environment. In partnership with families and our community, our mission is to promote confidence, inspire a passion for learning, and to prepare our students to become responsible global citizens. May I have a motion to approve the revised agenda?
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Questions or comments? Donna, do we have anybody for this evening?
No, we do not.
Okay, so we have no questions or comments this evening. And Elsie, do we have any follow-up? I think we addressed everything last time.
I think with Dr. Hassler's presentation, there were a lot of questions that were specific to that, so I think he answered the questions.
Okay, very good. An update on the reopening plan, so I will turn it over to Mrs. Rodriguez.
Thank you. So this is exciting. We have been waiting to present this, and this has been a work in progress. So I am truly excited about talking tonight about the next phase, and that's the phase of 5 days, all days. We've come up with a couple of hashtags. But before I do that, I want to really thank our staff, and that includes our administrators, our teachers, our custodians. Everybody has really done an amazing job, and I thank you, because without your support, we could not have done this, and without your support, we couldn't be moving forward. So there has been a lot of work behind the scenes, and you'll see it in my presentation, but I'm really excited about the fact that our goal is to bring back our students 5 days, all day. We start with our priorities, and they have not changed. From the beginning, since we started our reopening task force, we said we want to make sure that we maintain the safety and well-being of our students, ongoing social emotional supports for our students, and we know that being in the building and seeing teachers and seeing their friends is very important for our students. So this is why this is so important for us. And then lastly, of course, it's continue our robust instruction. And I had an opportunity today to visit some of our buildings, some of our elementary buildings, K-5, and truly, it's robust instruction. Students are learning whether they're in the classroom or they're at home, and they're progressing, and the teachers are having an amazing time. So I am truly, truly excited about the fact that we are ready. I was interviewed by a high school student who was writing a paper about why now. And so these are some of the reasons I wanted to share with you. First of all, we have 7 months of data. We've been able to bring our students in, keep them safe, even though the number of students at some point was high as far as COVID positive. The mitigation that we had within the buildings was close to nothing. We quarantined over 1,500 students, and I think by today probably closer to 1,700 students, but we have not had a case where a student has gotten COVID from a classmate. One of the other things is that the CDC has really provided us new guidelines to support in-person instruction. They've done their own studies, and the other piece is vaccinations, and I really want to take a moment to thank Dr. Sassy and all the people that she has worked with to help and make sure that anyone in our district who wanted to get a vaccine received a vaccine. And then lastly, it's a great time to start launching our programs for summer programs and for September. So it's a really good time for us to do this. So the first thing that we did when we started to think about returning our students to school was we gave parents an option, and we did a questionnaire. And parents were given 2 choices. You can come to school 5 days a week, or you can remain fully remote. And here is the data. The data shows that about 25% of our parents district-wide have decided to remain remote. If you look at the high school, we have approximately 57% of our students are planning to return in person. 71% of our students at the middle school plan on returning in person. CV is 81. North Main is 83, Pine Tree is 79, Sapphire is 79, and Smith Clove is 81%. So it is very evident to us that our parents want their children to return back to school 5 days, all day. One of the key things that has happened, and it recently happened, we got an update from the CDC, and what they said was they believe that it's safe for us to be in schools rather than 6 feet, 3 feet, with no barriers. I will say that I'm going on some assumptions. Although New York State Department of Health has not adopted this, I do believe they will be adopting this. But I want our families to know we're prepared for either way. We're prepared to bring our students back, whether it's 6 feet or 3 feet, by using barriers. So again, we are prepared to roll this out, even if New York State does not adopt it. So I want to talk a little bit about, I mentioned how Dr. Sassi has been instrumental in getting our teachers vaccinated. So just so that you know, we did a survey, and of those people responding, we had 86% of our teachers have either have been fully vaccinated or have received 1 vaccination. And 9% have an appointment to be vaccinated. So those are really, really good numbers and really make, that's another layer of safety. We've also met and talked about, so now we're going to have double the amount of students that would normally be on any given day. How do we process that? How do we make sure that the students come in and that they're safe? One of the things that we have done is that we've decided to have temperature, wrist scanners. So we will be able to take every student's temperature as they come into the building. It is an expense, but we felt that it was an expense that made sense. Not only that, we do plan on using them in other venues, and I don't think that temperature taking is something that's going to go away quickly. So if we don't use them in our buildings, we'll use them in our athletic events, and so we're really excited and happy that we have that. We continue to maintain that everybody has to wear a mask, remain socially distant as much as possible. As I said before, there will be the use of barriers. Hand washing has been reinforced, ongoing cleaning and disinfecting. And then we also have purchased a sizable amount of KN95 masks because we want to make sure people feel comfortable, right? Whether it's a staff member, a bus driver, we just want to make sure that if there's some concern, we do everything in our part to mitigate that concern. Another piece is ventilation. Because of it, spring is here. So windows are going to be open in the classroom to allow fresh air. The use of outdoor space. We've also purchased tents and tables so that students can go outside to have lunch or take the classroom outside. That's always an opportunity. Our building administrators have reconfigured some of the space. And then one other piece that's been positive is that contact tracing protocols maintained to identify those at risk of exposure. So if you've been vaccinated or you have recently had COVID within the last 3 months, you do not have to quarantine. So that is really a benefit for us as well. The other question that parents had was, well, what's the bus going to be like? We will have 2 students per seat. We will try to make sure they're from the same family, but all students will have to be fully masked. The drivers, after they're done with their run, they will go out and clean the surfaces. And then we're going to have approximately 46 students in each bus. Our bus, the capacity of our bus is 76 students, so we still are going to go under capacity, but we're going to increase the capacity, which again will make it easier for us to transport students to school. The question that we always have is how do we monitor our progress? So we'll continue to use our COVID dashboard, which we have to do daily, and we'll take a look at what the number of COVID positive cases are. We've been very fortunate because we've worked with 2 local pediatricians. Before we even began to develop this plan, we met with them and we talked to them about what makes sense. And so we've been having online communication with them. They told us, prior to the CDC coming out with their information, that they believe that 3 feet would be safe as long as people are wearing a mask. So we'll continue to do that because it's very important for us as a school district to continue to adhere to the CDC guidelines and our local guidelines. Next steps. Dr. Hassler had mentioned before that he will be meeting with some of our reopening committee members. And then this is the the big aha. I will share with you a little story that I was in Sapphire this morning, and I was talking to the students about coming in, and a young boy, I can't remember his name, who was online, said to me, "Mrs. Rodriguez, so what's the date?" So I said to him, April 12th. I have never seen students more happy and more excited than the group of students that I was in. They were so happy because for the first time they were going to meet kids that they've only known through the computer. So our goal, and I say our goal because in a pandemic, I never know what can happen, but our goal is to bring back our K-5 students on April 12th, and then our high school and middle school students on April 16th. 19th. I'm always saying 16th. Yes, 19th, April 19th. And then parents will receive more information regarding this before the end of the week. Any questions?
Yes.
Here we go.
Okay. I have a couple, but I guess, and I don't know that we even know answers to this yet, but do we know how the 3 feet will then impact some of our extracurricular clubs, our athletic teams, perhaps having these clubs now be able to meet in person? I mean, I know that we're talking a lot about the academic piece, but I've gotten a lot of questions about those 2 components also.
I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hassler because I know we've been in conversation about extracurricular activities like school clubs.
Sure.
And athletics.
And extracurriculars, activities, and clubs are being handled a little bit differently than athletics, obviously, because athletics can only be attended by students in person. So we haven't fully gotten guidance yet, as Mrs. Rodriguez had mentioned. We have CDC guidance about what they're saying. We're waiting for final guidance from New York State in terms of what that is going to look like, because right now there's parameters in place about when masks have to be worn, the amount of distance, and that also applies to physical education classes as well. So as soon as we get the final guidance related to that, obviously we'll be able to make any modifications necessary.
Can I just jump in there for 1 second? Because I do want to make a point. I think one of the, and I don't want to use the word issue, one of the variables that we have to take into consideration is transporting students, right? So if we are going to have them stay for after school, more than likely we want to transport them. So we've been having ongoing conversations about, will we have a 4 o'clock bus? Will we have a 5 o'clock bus? So all those things are being discussed.
Okay.
Right.
But if we want students to stay after school, then one of the things that we'll have to do is provide them with transportation.
Right, and right now, because we're on the hybrid schedule, kids are in school 2-3 days a week. The other days, if they're participating in some of the extracurricular activities that are in person, the parents are providing transportation both to and from. Now, when we talk about resuming 5 days worth of instruction, the kids are going to be in school every single day and they're going to physically be here. So we started conversations about the possibility of bringing back some of those bus runs to be able to accommodate for that. The extracurricular club piece is a little bit of a different situation because athletics are still open to our track C, our fully remote kids, but they have to be agreeable to come into school physically to participate in them. The clubs are a little bit different, where we've been running them remotely through this point to be able to give equal access to both the in-person kids and the fully remote kids. We're thinking that they're probably going to continue with that remote piece in order to be able to give the track C kids as much of an opportunity to be able to participate, but there's still going to be some in-person things that are going to be happening along the way. I know, for example, some of the musicals, I think I talked about this at previous meeting, some of the musicals are trying to do in-person things with like the set building design and things like that. In fact, we had a conversation the other day about, can we do maybe some outdoor performances for some of the musical productions and things like that throughout the spring. So we are going to be trying to do what we can with some of this new guidance to be able to increase the in-person opportunities for kids also as well for the extracurriculars.
Erica, did you say that you're waiting still on guidance for physical education? Or
Well, the issue is that, as Mrs. Rodriguez said, the shift to the 3 feet is something that's come from the CDC, but we don't have the official notification from the New York State Department of Health that they're going to be following suit with that recommendation. So as soon as we have that final guidance, that may allow us to be able to do some additional in-person opportunities, and again, there's very specific guidance right now that's been in place from the beginning of the school year about the amount of space that kids need to be in terms of, overexertion with regards to when they can have a mask, when they don't need to have a mask. So right now, if you've been to any of our sporting events, kids are masked all the time.
I'm speaking specifically about physical education
Yep.
classes during the school day.
Yep.
Has that guidance been updated?
No.
No.
No,
No,
and that's unfortunate, but that guidance has not been updated, and that was,
So it's still 12 feet?
is still 12
still-
feet, and I think that that's part of the issue that we had when we were talking about everybody was going back to sports, but meanwhile, in the classroom, it was 12 feet. So,
And that's the same for music as well, for all?
And literally, we were having the same exact conversation with, in my notes, I'm going to talk about the virtual concert that's happening on Friday night. The hope would be that, the reduction to the 3 feet of social distancing will also trickle down to some of these other items, but they haven't yet. So we're still waiting for that final sort of guidance on, and there's tons of studies that are out there, but we're waiting for something definitive that we can sort of base our decisions on in that effect. As of right now, this moment in time, it's still the previous guidance that we've had.
right, and I know Mr. Jaborski provided us with some research that has been done about music and why it doesn't have to be, I think it's 6 feet or 12 feet, whatever it is, that it should be reduced. But we're still sort of working that out. I think right now, the focus is returning the students, and then our focus will be bringing, having the extracurricular activities, because we do know that there's a difference between doing something virtually and doing it in
Right.
person.
And even some of this is going to have an impact also on, many of our ensembles meet during the school day. And right now, they're meeting during the school day with, only a fraction of the kids because we're in hybrid. So you have your A-day course kids that come on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and your B-day course kids that come in on Wednesdays and Fridays. But now going to 5 days, all of the in-person students are going to be there for chorus, and we're still waiting to kind of see how exactly we're going to be able to design that to be able to accommodate for all the kids. There's guidance about the aerosols with regards to the amount of space that kids need to be without their masks on. And right now, again, if you go to one of our sporting events, our kids are masked continuously all the time.
But there are some things that we're not changing with return to school. We're not going to bring back Little Miracles or, the preschool.
For this
For this school year, no.
No,
For
not
this
for
school
this
year,
year.
no. We're talking about what we can possibly do for September, but for this school year, no. And largely because the Little Miracles, the Little Miracles program is a semester program. There's a fall semester cohort and a spring semester cohort. So now, April 19th, when the high school returns to full 5 days, that's already halfway through semester 2. So there aren't any plans for this school year. Sorry.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Extra help for secondary, middle school, high
Yep.
school, is that going to be in-person, remote, option for the teacher? How's that going to be set up?
That similarly kind of falls under the umbrella that we're talking about for the late buses, because right now, the teachers are doing largely extra help that's remote, so that way, the hybrid kids, on the day that they're fully remote, the teachers are offering extra help to also kind of scoop up the remote-only kids. Now the kids are going to be in school 5 days a week. That's going to have to change a little bit. So we're talking about the logistics piece where the 4 o'clock bus would potentially be not only for kids that would be participating in any in-person clubs, but also might be staying after school for extra help and things like that as well.
And it would probably be Tuesday through Thursday.
Right.
Monday or Friday.
And that's the way that it has always been.
Yeah.
And it would
The
be
teacher-
in-person extra help rather than...
Yes, they would still, because we still have, as Mrs. Rodriguez said, the percentage of kids that are remote only,
Right.
they still have to do some live streaming of extra help as well.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the other question I have is, I know a lot of juniors are curious with the still maintaining 50% capacity on buses.
Yep.
Will they be still allowed to drive to the high school, or will they be having their permits revoked?
I think that's gonna
Not
be.
to put you on the spot or anything.
Well, you know
I think
what?
that's
At
going to be
50
down to the wire. What you were going
Well, I was going to say, we have, I looked at the chart, it's like 54% of the high schools, 57% of the students are coming back in. I guess the high school would have to take a look at that and decide whether they're going to revoke that. I don't necessarily know if that's going to happen.
I think it's literally going to come down to numbers. I think they're going to have to drill down to.
I'm trying to look for Mr. Casti. Is he there? There he is. Mr. Casti, do you have an idea of how that's going to be addressed?
Originally, when we sent out the information, we said if we went back to like a daily schedule, we would not give our juniors parking spaces because we would give preference to seniors. but Mrs. Bennett is working on looking at the students who are coming back and who are not coming back to see if those numbers will work out for us. So as Dr. Hassler said, it's going to be we're going to make it as much as a not last minute announcement, but it might be a last minute announcement.
So can we work on it not being a last-minute announcement? Okay, thank you.
It might be a last hour, it might be not a last minute, it
No,
might be a last
no,
hour
no.
announcement rather than a last minute.
Whatever we can do to help that, I think, because I'm sure, and, you know, Ms. Bennis knows, and Mr. Casti, this is probably, there's a little bit of angst in this, because they're thinking, I had this great opportunity to drive to school and park my car, and now it's, so we'll work, and whatever, you know,
Well, I don't know if it also plays into if, you know, the decision to return for 5 days, that now that they're going to be on a bus, it might affect their
good point.
decision.
So I think that, you know, we have until the 19th, they have that additional week, so I think that we can probably, you know, sort of get that in.
They're using a senior spot who is remote. Now those seniors are going to return to school and park their car in their own spot. They were just.
Got it, makes sense. Okay, thank you, guys.
Okay.
I have a
thank you.
question,
And-
one more
okay,
question.
Sorry.
So just thinking about, you know, some of what else he said about changing transportation, there's going to be more students, they can sit next to each other. Are we going to look at ways to go back to the way it was? As far, I'm thinking about bathrooms, specifically at the high school. They're every other, like, there's no need for that anymore, right?
Well, we're going to have more kids.
But there's still a barrier,
Okay.
right? And
Right.
I'm not talking about the urinals, but when you have a stall bathroom, like right now they're closed, every other one.
Oh, no, I agree with you. What I'm saying is probably, and, you know, I'll ask them again, we'll probably need to open up more bathrooms. You have more kids.
Oh, right.
Any given day, you're going to have, you know, 30% or 40% of the, 30% of the kids. So
I
now
never
you
really knew where that came from, that guidance, right? Because, I mean, there's a physical barrier there.
Correct.
Like, why would we need to shut down those bathrooms?
I don't know.
Just the boys.
Boys and girls.
Good question.
But so
Yeah.
we'll look at ways
So we'll
to
look at
bring
that.
back
I
those-
think, here's what I know, the building principals and the administrators of each building have been working really hard to make sure that they make accommodations, because now we are going to be 5 days all day. So yes, that will be looked at as well.
And that may be one of those 3 feet items where I think initially I think that the distance is less than 6 feet technically between the, you know, sinks or whatever in the bathroom. But now, I mean, I don't know the actual space between sinks in a restroom, but if it's less than 6 feet but greater than 3 feet, and those are the final guidelines that get adopted, then
Right. But the sinks are, I mean, they can close every other sink, I don't have an
Right.
issue with that.
I think,
but it's the
but I think it's
stalls.
closing the stalls.
Right.
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 All right.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Okay.
I hope you all are excited about having the kids come
Oh,
back.
I'm ecstatic.
we'll
Okay, so moving on, we have a presentation of the 2021-2022 non-instructional budget items. I believe Dr. Hassler is giving us this presentation.
I am.
No?
I actually believe that I'll be kicking it off, Stacy.
Okay,
and,
there you go, Patrick.
Then I'll pass it off to
Even
Dr.
better.
Hassler.
See that? My apologies.
That's okay. So, so tonight we're going to talk a little bit, we're going to continue our discussion of the 2021-2022 general fund budget. I'm going to briefly touch on the central administration function of the budget and give a little update on state aid and federal aid associated with the American Rescue Plan. We're going to hear from safety and security. We're going to go over that budget. And then I'll turn it over to Dr. Hassler, who will probably do most of the heavy lifting tonight on the budget and talk about the instructional side of things. So Frank Scolanti, our Director of Safety and Security, will deliver the safety budget after me, and then we'll pass it to Dr. Hassler, who will talk about the instructional budget. So slideshow. To the right. Play from start.
It's going to show the notes.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Go, exit out. Exit.
Want the little
Uncheck,
the little
it says,
screen at the bottom.
I think, is it show media controls? To the right.
It's your in presenter view.
Oh,
You know, none of us do PowerPoint anymore.
That's what I did already.
We started there. We have to,
There we
There we go. Okay.
go.
Thanks, Prudence. So we've overcome our technical difficulties.
Awesome.
Okay.
Good news.
Yes. So let's get into it. So the first slide here I'm showing is the Board of Education, District Clerk, Chief District Administrator, which is the Superintendent's Office, and the Public Information budget. And what we're showing here is totals, subtotals by functional area. So if you notice, the first line there says 1010, Board of Education. So that is the subtotal for that function code. 1010 is for Board of Education. So there's really about 5 or 6 line item budget codes that fall under that, but I didn't think it really made sense to go line by line tonight, so we're just sort of rolling this up into some totals. So functionally, we've grouped these together. The next slide will be the business office, personnel, legal, tax collection, some other things which functionally sort of fall in together. So the reality here is there's really no big change year over year. The Board of Education is a $300 increase year over year. Items that would fall under Board of Education would be things like conferences you may attend. I think the biggest line item is a BOCES charge associated with board docs. Again, not a lot going on here. District clerk, a very minor increase year over year. The district meetings sort of falls under the district clerk's purview, and that's not only these meetings, but mostly about the annual meeting, the budget meeting. So we pay folks to man the tables at those meetings. There's a lot of mailings involved. There's postage involved. There's software that keeps track of all the polling books and voters in the community. So that's where that $40,700 comes into play. Chief School Administrator is the Superintendent's Office. Again, $500 increase there. It's really immaterial. And then finally, Public Information and Services. So that's, again, related to the Superintendent's Office and Board of Education. Services under that would be things associated with our website, maintenance of our website, BOCES charges for printing. We do mostly actually for the budget, the big budget mailing we do, some postage items. So those are the nature of the services and the charges that fall under Public Information. So here we're going to touch on the business office, business administration, legal. I call it unallocated insurance because it's actually insurance, property insurance, liability insurance for the entire district. We do have 2 other insurance budget codes which are allocated to transportation because it's for auto insurance and for the actual bus garage. The BOCES administrative and capital charge, so that's sort of like the overhead charge for BOCES, and as part of BOCES, we're required to pay that each year. And I believe the BOCES budget meeting is tonight, actually, at the same time as our meeting. So they would, provide a lot more detail than I can about that aspect of it. We're going to touch on personnel and debt service. So again, this budget table is rolled up by functional area. So the first functional area is 1310, that's business administration. So there's about 8 codes there. You see a increase of $5,100, and that's primarily due to an increase in a consultant line. And the consultant line has to do with purchasing consortiums that we're a part of. And we've done this in the past. We've talked about this where we've participated in these consortiums, particularly education data. And we're opting to go back into that. It saves a lot of time when we actually in the business office don't have to do some of the bids and the RFPs, purchasing on behalf of the entire district. So that accounts for that increase. There's a few other offsetting decreases, so the net change is an increase of $5,100. Next line there, 1320, is auditing. So that line covers, again, it's 1300 is sort of business and finance. That covers both our internal audit and our external audit. Those are annual requirements. In fact, tonight we're approving the latest internal audit report a little bit later on in the agenda. So no change there. Tax collection, no change. Fiscal agent fees, no change. Fiscal agent fees are associated with annual continuing disclosure requirements of the school district because we have serial bonds that are traded out in the public square, so to speak. we have to annually have our fiscal agent create a disclosure document about the fiscal condition of the district. If anything's changed, that's where those charges or expenses are charged to. We also charge if we were to issue any debt, and we would have a fiscal agent assist us with that, like we did that this past year for refinancing of bonds. That's where that would go. Legal line is function code 1420, and we see a decrease there of about $5,000, not about, exactly $5,000. So we're going from $245,000 to $240,000 there. And although it's hard to know exactly how legal will turn out year in and year out, just based on things that can happen, we felt a small reduction there. It was actually under the bond counsel area, which again is related to any debt or issuing of debt or advisory services with bond counsel. We could reduce that line. Our function code 1910 is the insurance line, and we're looking at a $15,000 decrease there. We're going from $450,000 to $435,000, and there's a series of coverages that are included in that line. That line is also includes student accident insurance, so there's a charge in there, and then there's another charge layered on that, believe it or not, for football. Actually, there's a separate insurance charge for that. So again, we felt like our experience has been good. A lot of times that's based on experience, and that we could safely lower that. We also, as I mentioned, have insurance coverage or appropriations in the budget under transportation. So the next functional areas: school association dues, judgments and claims, refunds of real property taxes. No change in any of those budget areas. The administrative charge for BOCES, so I'd like to just sort of pause for a moment there, because I've highlighted the $55,000 increase, and I'll just point to it here. We can see that, and the charge is going from about $944,000 to $999,000, and by participating with BOCES, it's more or less required that we pay these charges. The line right after that is BOCES capital expenses, so that's expenses related to any capital work that they do. And for the most part, the administrative increase is related to retirees. So they had a large number of retirements, I think, this past year, and the cost of retiree health insurance is charged to that administrative code for BOCES. Most of BOCES expenses are charged out to individual districts based on the services that those expenses provide, if you will. So in other words, if somebody is working for CTEC, involved with CTEC in any way, those districts that participate in CTEC would, pay for all those expenses through the charges for CTEC. The one difference here is retirees' health insurance. So that's just sort of spread equally amongst all the districts through administrative charge. Next line, personnel, there's a modest increase of $3,000. I think that was related to an increase in materials and supplies. And the real takeaway here is this highlighted line, total general fund increase of 1.64%. And so that increase accounts for both the first slide, which is Board of Education Superintendent Office, and then all these other central office functions that I just walked you through. And again, sort of the way I look at it, the takeaway, I have the arrow pointing from the $55,000 increase in BOCES down to the 1.64%, because the increase is almost entirely driven by BOCES, the BOCES increase, which we have no control over. So if not for that big increase, the codes that we control would probably have been a net decrease, budget over budget. So the final series of codes here: serial bonds, school construction, installment purchase. So that's just the debt service the district pays every year. It's a small decrease, a little more than half a percentage point. And we break it out in two budget codes, because the one is serial bonds, which are bonds that we issue when we do capital work, and the other is for that's more like a borrowing almost, and that's related to the energy performance contract we did about 10 years ago. Any questions on this? Okay. So moving on, let's sort of shift gears and talk a little bit about state aid. So at the last meeting, we talked about the governor's proposal, the executive proposal for state aid, and There's now a Senate and an Assembly proposal, and I talked about the big process where the Board of Regents from the State Ed Department comes in high, the governor comes in low, and we sort of meet in the middle somewhere. The end of this month, right, was when the budget needs to be adopted. The beginning of the state fiscal year is April 1st. So, we'll know what the real answers are pretty soon. But there's some good news. There's some hope on this front, I think, in terms of state aid. Both the Senate and the Assembly have agreed on a few things vis-a-vis the governor's proposal. Both agree that they should reject the local district funding adjustment cut. So there was a cut, and I think I tried to point this out. It was difficult to see, but there was a cut that the governor had proposed in state aid. And he had this cut, and then he had a backfill of the cut with federal dollars. And so both the Senate and the Assembly are saying we should eliminate that cut to state aid, which is great. They're both rejecting the governor's services aid proposal, and that was the proposal where he was going to roll up 11 types of expenditure-based and categorical aids into a single block grant. And we had said that generally, when you decouple, like for instance, transportation expenses from aid, that's a bad thing, particularly if you're a district like ours who's seeing increases in certain areas. So I think overall, most districts felt that was not going to be beneficial to them, especially to BOCES. So that was another one of those aids that was going to be rolled in. So both houses are rejecting that. They're both rejecting the idea of flat foundation aid. And I mentioned foundation aid is approximately 60% of our state aid. It's the largest component. It's the general no strings attached aid. It's not expenditure based or anything. And the governor was proposing no increase. So there's no increase for this year and no increase for next year. And we've talked a lot about state or foundation aid in the past where it was never fully phased in. It was supposed to provide more equity and adequacy, which is what state aid is supposed to do. It's supposed to be balancing. For districts with low wealth, they get more state aid, and high wealth gets less. So it was never fully phased in. And we used to talk about how beneficial it would be for our district if it was fully phased in. I think we stopped keeping track when we were at about 80 million, like in lost aid over time. But one of the great things about both the proposals is they're both proposing full phase-in within 3 years. So that would really be good. So they're both proposing increases in foundation aid for next year and full phase-in over the next 3 years. So that's good news. What else? Both talk about, I'm not going to go through everything, but both talk about expanding the expenses that would be eligible for transportation aid. And I had talked about this at a prior meeting where State Ed sent out a memo where they said many of the ordinary expenses we experienced last year and this year would not be eligible for transportation aid because there were no kids in school during closure, periods of closure. So they've kind of opened that window up a little bit, which is good. What else? They both are proposing to allow districts to have more unassigned fund balance. So the Senate is proposing an increase from 4% of our subsequent year budget to 8%, and they're making that a temporary measure. It would occur over the next 5 years. And the Assembly is proposing 4% to 6% over 3 years. So again, it's a recognition that we need more financial flexibility, allowing us to hold, which many districts do, by the way, hold more than 4% in fund balance makes sense, especially in these times. And the one notable piece, final piece here with state aid, New York State state aid, is neither proposal included any American Rescue Plan funds. So that's the big, huge federal program that was just passed, I think, on March 11th. So that's good news, too, because there could be, and I think there will be, another pot of money for us to draw upon and use for the next few years. And I'm going to talk about that in my next slide. So any questions about where we are in state aid? So we don't know for sure. We're cautiously optimistic, but Senate and Assembly, both proposals are better than the governor's proposal. Okay, so let's shift gears here to the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. And the full name actually is American Rescue Plan Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, the ARP-ESSER. That's what I've been calling it. So There's about, if you look down here, there's about 100, and I'm pointing to the lower right-hand corner of the slide, 110 billion for LEAs, local educational agencies. So there's LEAs at the federal level and SEAs. And SEA is a state educational agency. And there's funding for the state educational agencies as well. But the allocation distribution is based on the Title I formula. So Title I is a grant that school districts receive, targeted generally to disadvantaged students. And the formula, the monies are largely driven by metrics of need. So there's a few different ways to look at that, but it's free and reduced price lunches. So if you had a higher percentage of free and reduced price lunch students, you would get more Title I aid. There's other things about based on assistance and things like that, census poverty. So if you're in a district with more students that are, meet the census poverty metric, then you'd receive more aid. So that's how they're allocating this funding. There are some, I'll air quote, strings attached to it, but it's fairly broad. It seems fairly broad. And we don't have any really detailed guidance yet. We've reached out to Congressman Maloney's office to sort of see if there's any more information they could provide to us. But we're reading the guidance that's out there right now. So the use of the funds, one of the major uses, there's a set-aside, learning loss set-aside of 20%. So you have to spend at least 20% of these funds on mitigating learning loss that may have occurred during the pandemic, during the closure. So we can all imagine kids weren't in school, they weren't learning in the same way. There may have been learning loss for certain students. So you have to spend at least 20% on that. You can spend all of it on that, but 20% at least has to be targeted for that. You can also spend money on addressing the needs of underrepresented students. So these include low-income students from low-income families, special needs students, English language learners, racial ethnic minorities, homeless, and foster care students. So targeting those students who may have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic and the closures. That's also permissible use. Educational technology is a permissible use, and we know that we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on that during the pandemic to go to a one-to-one initiative on upgrades in infrastructure, et cetera. School facility upgrades that address health issues and air quality, it's unusual, is also permissible use. Summer learning, so we've been talking a lot about that as a learning loss mitigation strategy. So that would fit into your 20% set aside. After school programs permissible, mental health services permissible. And strangely enough, I have a bullet there, activities to maintain operations and continuity of services and employ existing staff. Like to me, that was like, I don't even know what that means. It sort of could be anything, it seems like. But that's in there. There's also some strings attached related to maintenance of equity requirements. And we often hear about maintenance of effort with grants. And this is similar. I don't want to get into too many details, but essentially what it means is state and local school districts, they can't use federal monies to offset their what should be their local investments, particularly with certain students that may be, the students I mentioned, underrepresented students and subgroups who may have been adversely or disproportionately impacted by this. So you still have to maintain your own financial effort in these areas. In terms of a timeline, so it seems like you can use these funds 2.5, almost up to 3 years. The guidance currently says through September 23rd, 2023. So that's more than 2 of our fiscal years. And typically with federal grants, you can actually extend that through the end of that year. So it could be into 2024 where we have these funds available to us. It did mention that once the funds are provided, and this will all work through state education agencies, provided to the state then has 60 days to distribute those funds or make those funds available, I should say, because I think it'll be a drawdown process like we use with regular grants. 60 days they're required to make those available to local school districts. So that's great. That's really good. The other sort of final piece on my slide here is additional IDEA funding associated with the American Rescue Plan. And IDEA is Individuals with Disability Education Act. So it's essentially a grant that we receive every year. We account for it in a special aid fund, and I mentioned that at the last meeting. And it's not just a 20% increase for Monroe-Woodbury, it's an overall increase in the appropriations for IDEA of 20%, which is fairly significant increase, and those IDEA monies are targeted to special needs students. The final thing I wanted to say related to the ARP has to do with funding for non-public schools. So some of the other CARES money that was available to us, as a public school, we had to share that with the non-public schools. And it's almost, I think, about $3 billion earmarked in this program for non-public schools. And it was interesting, our Senator Schumer, I think, played a big role in that. I had read that in the New York Times recently. So that's good news. And then the other piece, one of the things that I'm seeking clarification on, is the ability to retroactively charge expenses to the grant. So in other words, we experienced a lot of expenses last year, this year. If this grant funding, we don't know exactly when how it's going to unfold, but if it unfolded, let's say after July 1st, we're in our new year, can we look backwards and say, when we had to buy 3,500 Chromebooks or 3,000 Chromebooks, we think that should be grant eligible. And I think that's how it will work, that expenses can be charged back to the start of the pandemic, which would be March of 2020. So that's, again, good news. Just for context, in the lower right-hand corner there, I have a little table that shows the ARP funding for school districts at $110 billion. I mentioned that already. But it also shows funding per pupil, and this is sort of aggregated at the national level for title grants and IDEA, so that I mentioned those already. So in an ordinary year, about $640 per pupil is allocated for title and IDEA. The March CARES from last year was about $270 per pupil. The latest CARES Act 2, which was December of 2020, was about $1,100 per pupil. And the ARP, the rescue plan, is about $2,600. So, it's a much bigger scale as far as money for local education agencies. So we're hopeful about this and how this may pan out for us. Any questions on this one?
I have one question, Patrick. If at all, did our Title I formula for our free and reduced lunch, was that impacted at all this year because we didn't necessarily have kids back in the building fully? I know we talk about applying for that every year, so
Yep.
was that impacted at all this year?
No, I don't think
Okay.
it was. No. And often what they do is they use like an average, like a 3-year look-back average. So year-to-year variations won't matter as much. But no, I don't think it was.
Okay.
Anything else? Because there's still a lot of uncertainty associated with this, and we're basically talking about the guidance that's available, but we still have a lot of questions.
So the 110 billion is in addition to what you were getting before, or this is?
This would be in addition to any other CARES money that would have been targeted to school districts and education. So this would be new monies.
The 2,600?
Yep.
Per student?
Per student. So that's sort of an average aggregated number nationally. It's not just, that's not specific to Monroe-Woodbury, 2,600. But that's, what I was doing is trying to show the context, that how much bigger the ARP program is compared to the other recent educationally, directed programs.
I think we're about what, our average is around 26,000 per student total cost.
Yes.
And I think the
All in.
national average is around 12,000.
It's probably about right down. I'm not sure nationally exactly.
Yeah, I've looked at it before. And you probably don't know this, but are they thinking of allocating it similar to what those costs are, or just it's across the board?
The allocation formula is based on the Title I, which is based on need,
Got it.
student need.
But it won't be adjusted based on region?
I don't think it is.
Yeah, historically it hasn't been.
Right, I don't think it is.
So
It's census poverty, it's free and reduced priced lunch, it's
The 2,600 is the average for every student, not just
Correct.
the ones that are in Title
The
I.
national average.
That's amazing because like you get a state like Alabama where it's $9,000 a student total versus it cost us, they're getting 26% of their total budget
Right.
covered. Whereas with us, it's, much smaller
Yeah,
percentage.
in New York State, ordinary state aid is adjusted based on regional factors, because obviously the cost of living is different in New York
Sure.
State. But no, I haven't read anything about an adjustment like that for this. Anything else? Okay, moving on. So the ever-popular budget triangle appears again, and I won't focus on this long, but I just, in the upper left-hand corner under state aid, I've highlighted that. So obviously, when we originally went through this, we were looking at potentially a revenue shortfall, and we were estimating at 4.8 million. As state aid increases, and it looks like it may, but we don't know for sure until the end of the month, there may be some federal aid. As that increases, our hypothetical revenue shortfall would decrease. And that's sort of the takeaway of this. That's all I was going to say on that. Upcoming budget dates, on tonight's agenda, we're considering modifying the calendar and moving meeting from April 7th to the 14th. So that's when we'll have the personnel and superintendent's budget recommendation. 22nd is the adoption of the budget by the board. Property tax report cards due to SED the next day after that. The public budget hearing is on May 5th. We mail the notice the day after, and then the budget vote date is May 18th.
So Patrick, if I'm understanding this correct, it's 2,600 a student. So we would be looking at roughly 18 million?
Well, that was just a national average, Don. That was,
Right.
it is not specific to.
I understand, and all of these are, until they come out with the final number.
Well, the number that we've been given is around 7.5 million.
Okay.
Allocated to Monroe-Woodbury.
Okay.
So, I mean, the cat is out of the bag. There's some numbers flying around. We heard initially a number of 7.8, and that turned out to be wrong, but I think 7.5 is.
Right.
Is the number, so.
And I think one of the things that we've been trying to do is to have a conversation with Sean Patrick Maloney, because I think it's a
We're getting
phrase,
about $1,000 per student.
probably.
$1,100.
Yes.
Well, some of that doesn't go to all of our students, though. That's part of the problem.
Well, I don't think so. I think that it does go to all of our students.
Okay.
It
Our
will,
students.
Yeah. So in other words, a permissible expense or use would be technology. So if everybody benefits from a technology expense, that's going to all of our students.
And it tracks, does it track to our state aid now where it is close to the 50% or 50, minus, or is it about 42%?
The amount of state aid we receive?
Meaning, you're right, because we're at what, 58?
No, it's state aid as a portion of our revenue budget.
Our aidable number because of our free and reduced lunches.
Yeah, well, it is.
CapEx.
Yeah, it depends on the aid formula. So for transportation, it's about 70%, and building aid is like 60, plus they add another 10, so that's more like 70 as well, so.
Okay.
And the other clarification, something that you brought up, and Mr. Cahill mentioned it, is that normally when we receive monies like this, we have to give it to our non-public schools, our students that attend non-public schools. I do not think that is the case, but we need clarification on that,
Okay.
right? That's the big question.
Right, that's a huge question.
That's a very big question, because
Yeah.
typically we have to give a portion of whatever we receive, and if that's not the case, then that's $7 million for the district.
Correct.
Okay. But when do you expect that you'll have any of that clarification at this point? Not until the official spring budget comes out?
No, I think there's a lot of questions. Everyone has a lot of questions, right? So I think they're going to have to deal with it and address it pretty quickly.
Okay.
And I think it could be different state by state. Like there's how the federal government handles it, and then it's going to be distributed to the state again based on Title I factors and their proportion of each state that fall into those criteria, and then from there it would be distributed within the individual state. So I think, I'm hopeful we'll have some answers, pretty soon, within 4 to 6 weeks.
So the $7 million that Elsie was talking about, Is it divided between public and non-public schools based on a number of students? How is it divided?
Well, we're hopeful that it's not
It's not divided.
that it's going to be entirely available for our district.
What if it is divided?
Well-
Let's just, what's the formula?
Well, we would have to see how the guidance directs us to do that. But if we were to do that, then there would have to be some sort of proportional allocation. What we did, there were some strings attached to some monies that we received for this year. It was like about 1.3 million. And what we did was, it was a fairly laborious process where we had to reach out to every non-public school where there were any students attending and request that they let us know that they were interested in being part of, having some of this money that's available. We then requested a lot of information from them to be part of this. Some declined, some did not, agree to be part of it, but we ended up having to redistribute like hundreds of thousands of dollars, like out of about 1.3 million, to the non-public schools, so.
And it's the responsibility of the district to do this work?
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Yes. It's the responsibility of the district to do the work, and in some cases, if we talk about the Smart School Bond that we passed years ago, and we were not told that we needed to share that with our non-publics, and then the rules change midway after we had already given our proposal, then not only do we have to share the money, but we also have to maintain whatever it is, and Bargov, Dr. Viers can speak to that.
But we have to maintain the inventory, we have to maintain all the process. So there is a operation cost attached to that, which we technically don't get it, but we still have to manage. So the management cost is not covered as part of the distribution, but we are still responsible to manage that piece.
So that's why we're a bit hesitant if we sound as though we're saying we believe that it's not. Because of our experience in the past, they will they will give us the money, and then potentially, our concern is that midway through, we start to develop our own plans, and then they say, well, you'll have to share part of that money with your non-public schools.
So is there an additional plan that's coming out from the government to provide money to the schools that are?
To the non-public?
Yeah.
There is.
There is.
That was the one bullet I pointed out where it said I think it was 2.75 billion has been specifically earmarked
So
for non-public.
that's why you think that may
That's
not-
why I think in
Right.
this, and a lot of people objected to the concept in the previous CARES where we had to, public schools had to share it because it diluted, what was a limited resource. So I think it may be different this time.
Right.
Based on this specific earmarking of money for non-publics, we're taking care of the non-publics, we're taking care of the publics and the state education agencies as well. They're getting, I don't know, somewhere like 8% of whatever's going to each state. They get to hold that back and have their own programs.
But that's an assumption. And I think, part of the reason that the other piece was we wanted to delay because we or move it to another week because we wanted to get confirmation of
That's right.
what we believe to be true. However, I want to preface that by, there have been times that we've been told that that's not the case, and then down the line, we get an email that says, no, we've now changed the plan. They have done that as well.
So, just one more follow-up question. So if, let's say, the district gets that money, you still cannot cover the shortfall in the budget because there are specific regulations as to the distribution of the money. So the deficit remains a deficit, you just have to spend money on something the government tells you to spend it on.
Well, like I said, I think there are some specific things they're targeting,
Seem pretty
right?
broad, though.
But they seem fairly broad, number
Yeah.
one. Number two, what I was trying to sort of convey is if there's additional state aid, the revenue shortfall would decrease. If there are expenses that we would incur, we have incurred, that can be charged or funded with this new ARP money, again, we could then reduce the budget. That would, again, lower the shortfall. So, in ordinary times, we typically will apply unassigned fund balance to balance the budget. Sometimes we need it, some other times we don't, or use reserves if we have too much in a reserve for a specific purpose. So I think it just brings us a lot closer to what would be a typical or ordinary year, an ordinary assignment of fund balance or appropriation of fund balance for the budget. And the good news is, if it pans out the way we hope, we can utilize this funding for 2 to 3 years. So it would be stabilizing.
It would be very good.
Right. Any other questions?
So
Okay,
their
so-
formula equates to about 40%, it looks like, of the average 2,600, which is, clearly there's a formula there, but our normal formula for the other aid is 60 to 70%, and the way they're doing the formula, it would be 40%, so it's kind of interesting.
Right.
If it was the 60%, we'd get another $500 per student.
Okay,
Thank
so,
you.
yeah, if there's no other questions, I'd like to invite Mr. Frank Squalante up to give us an overview of the safety and security budget.
It's the same thing, right? Fantastic.
Good evening, members of the Board of Education, our Superintendent Elsie Rodriguez, cabinet members, colleagues, and the Monroe-Woodbury community. Thank you for this opportunity to provide a brief summary and overview for the proposed 2021-2022 safety and security budget. Here we have the safety and security line item snapshot budget codes depicting proposed changes from 2021 to 2022 school year. The top 4 budget descriptions are security professional fees. These fees are related to our agreements with the Town of Woodbury and the Village of Monroe Police Departments and the costs associated with funding our SRO program. The proposed decrease in this code of 0.90% or $6,000 is related to the revised contract with the Town of Woodbury Police Department, reducing the expenses associated with their resource officer program. We eliminated the full-time position with Woodbury and now cover it with part-time SROs, giving us the same coverage and more flexibility if and when we close, for a small net savings of $6,000. Second, in our equipment code, the proposed increase of 34.67% or $5,200 is for our plan to expand our access control badge reader system district-wide, which I'll speak a little bit later on. Also, our security supplies, they've decreased 25% or $5,200, and the uniform service code, which was also decreased by 50%. It was all a result of limited need during our closures back in March last year due to COVID. What does security look like now? Like everything else this horrible pandemic has thrown at us, all the challenges, all the uncertainty, all the fear, anxiety, and stress, our school safety and security has and continues to persevere and adjust accordingly. It is with the full support of our district leadership, the principals, directors, along with all our support staff, monitors, bus drivers, custodial, clerical, food service workers, that we continue to work together as a team, making every effort to support the safe return to school for our students and staff. What is the typical day of our school safety officers? Our school safety department currently operates with approximately 13 contracted school safety officers, which is augmented by 13-plus substitute school safety officers, which support our arrivals, lunches, dismissals, and now athletic events and programs and activities during and after the school day. What are the typical duties of our school safety officers? Well, they're responsible for social distancing enforcement, keeping the kids spaced, temperature taking of students, COVID screening of staff, monitoring key locations within the school buildings, primarily at the high school and middle school, to ensure social distancing, supporting the administration in the buildings by providing individual safety observations on a case-by-case basis, directing parents students and staff during drills and emergencies, and monitoring our cameras and handling visitor management, just to name a few. We continue to adjust their school safety teams' schedules as needed, and their job function remains fluid. We are always looking for ways to assist them with the new challenges from COVID-19 and the obstacles that it brings, like communicating effectively while wearing masks and interacting with the students in the community in the performance of their duties. They must speak louder. They must use their body language to get people's attention. It's challenging. We continue to follow CDC guidelines, provide safety to our students and staff under these unique circumstances, and I'd like to acknowledge and commend our team members for their patience and commitment to work. The investment into our district-wide camera system. First, I'd like to thank our Assistant Superintendent for Compliance and Information Systems, Dr. Bhargav Vyas, for his continued vision, leadership, and support. Special thanks to his great staff as well. From his first day at the school district, he's been committed to the enhancement of our IT department. I know this firsthand. Working with the Smart School Bond, infrastructure upgrades have taken place district-wide. This was the first step to properly support the technology and camera expansion initiatives we are currently in the process of. We now enjoy access to approximately 224 cameras district-wide. Approximately 152 of them are interior, and 72 of them are strategically placed outside throughout the district in our 7 school buildings and support areas in campus. We share access to our exterior cameras with our local law enforcement partners at both the Monroe and Woodbury police departments. In the spring of last year, we added several cameras to our elementary schools. Again, working together as a team, our IT department, law enforcement, principals identified best locations for camera installations. Working closely with our vendor, researching various options in camera technology, we have added over 18 fisheye cameras to our arsenal of surveillance abilities. These fisheye security cameras are known best for their ultra-wide lenses and capable of providing surveillance with dynamic viewing angles, including panoramic 180-degree or 360-degree. Basically, these fisheye cameras cost more, but provide greater situational awareness for potential blind spots and the ability to create split different views to increase our coverage without having to install additional cameras. We're now scheduled to replace and upgrade our high school older analog cameras with new IP cameras, all in the effort to enhance and expand coverage at that site. Fisheye cameras will be included in that. The investment into our district-wide camera system continues to assist us with the protection support of our assets and remains one of our most valuable proactive security tools. The investment into our visitor management and access control systems. We are currently utilizing the Raptor visitor management system at all our schools. Raptor is our web-based visitor management system designed for K-12 schools. It's been and continues to be trusted to protect over 18,000 K-12 schools across our nation. It has the ability to monitor the sex offender database and is responsible for alerting officials of attempts to enter schools. It has been credited with the arrest of numerous absconded sex offenders that have crossed state lines nationally. Additionally, it has been credited with over 250,000 custody alerts since its inception back in 2002. The next layer to our visitor management access control protocols is the badge reader system, in which we are in the process of expanding district-wide. This type of access control system is the physical system that reads the laminated identification badge and it allows or denies access depending on rights. The benefit of this technology is a matter of who, where, and when. The badge reader access system determines who's allowed to enter, where they're allowed to enter, and when they're allowed to enter. This provides accountability and documents all that enter. We're excited to expand this technology as well. Our School Resource Officer Program. The district continues to utilize the services of both Monroe and Woodbury Police Departments that provide this successful and critical program for us. All 7 schools enjoyed a great benefit of having an armed, uniformed member of law enforcement on site the entire school day. The SROs are assigned carefully and are familiar with the schools they work at. Their marked police vehicles are visible out front, and their presence inside and out of the school building and campus remains a strong deterrent for those with bad intentions. The SROs are familiar with the parents and students, provide support with our drills, make students feel secure, and are a welcome asset to the school safety team. In closing, we continue to collaborate with our state and local law enforcement, first responders, and school safety partners throughout our region to share new ideas and remain current with the latest school safety initiatives and technology. Special thanks to our Assistant Superintendent for Business and Financial Services, Patrick Cahill, for his ongoing leadership and support towards school safety initiative, and Tanya Mulrad and her staff for all the support they provide me in accounting. Thank you for your time, and please let me know if you have any questions that I can answer while I'm here.
Frank, I had a question, and I don't want to get into specific processes, but with what's going on with our southern border right now, because a lot of the people don't have identification, do we have a process to, I guess, filter out, or I don't want the specifics because I don't like discussing that in public, but do we have a process to deal with, it sounds like, the potential for an influx of people with no identification? And the same thing goes for the students that come across, because as we've seen in the past, not all of them are, they might claim they're student age, but not all of them are always student age. They might say they're 16 or 17 and be 23. We've seen this in the past, but I don't know if, are we looking at processes to deal with those types of things? It sounds like there's a lot coming up.
Can I just jump into that? So
Yeah.
there's everything is a process in the district. So if you come to our district, you are required to go through registration, and Dr. Hassler's office oversees that. And so there is always oversight over that. And there are certain laws that require us to accept a student if we have a question and then follow up with any additional data. So there is an internal practice that we have to ensure that students who come to our district and may not have the proper documentation get that opportunity, but there is a process. So you just don't walk into Monroe-Woodbury and become a student here.
And we also, there are a number of agencies that are out there that we have to collaborate with, depending upon the circumstances. And I mean, there's so many individualized circumstances around students. And we collaborate with many different agencies regarding documentation and
Right, I'm looking at, the process looks fantastic. I mean, the Raptor system, the new cameras, it looks like we're doing a really good job of protecting both the staff and the students within the school, but I guess the other side of that is the parents of undocumented kids. I don't know all of the specifics of it,
Yeah,
but
Don,
it sounds like they don't have a lot of ID and.
But we have a process for that as well.
Okay, good.
We have
We do have a process.
Awesome.
There's an opportunity to verify every person, whether they show us an ID or not.
Okay.
So that process takes place.
Okay,
And every
good.
person is identified.
But I think, I would say most of our parents have some form of.
most do.
Most of our parents do have a form of ID.
Yeah, and I assume that. I know that I don't really understand how to, comprehend what's going on, which is a change in behavior for the border. And I was just trying to understand if it sounds like we do have procedures in place to prevent people that we really can't tell who they are getting into our school.
We do have a good process.
The fish eyes that you guys are installing, do they have an ability to read license plates as well? Or these are just generalized?
They're just generalized. They don't read license plates. I mean, if it was close to a vehicle, you possibly could zoom in and pick up the plate. It's not a license plate reader or anything like that.
I have a question about the high school cameras. Do you have a date in mind that you're hoping to go ahead and reinstall the new equipment?
Yes, we're being very aggressive with it. We just did a walkthrough yesterday with the installers, and they're looking at potentially next week during the break at coming in here and getting it done.
Okay.
So we're
great.
optimistic that that's
great.
going to happen.
Okay.
That's great.
Any other questions?
There was just a bank robbery in Goshen last Friday, and because of the outside digital cameras, well, they were analog, they were upgraded to digital, they were able to apprehend the perps in like 5 hours.
Yeah.
And it was primarily because of the digital cameras that they upgraded on the outside.
Nice.
I just want to say a thank you, Frank, because I know that your team does a great job. I can only comment on the high school and the middle school because that's where my students are, but I drop off and pick up more than I'd like because I prefer my kids to take the bus. But you guys do a great job, so I just want to say thank you. And, you know, you're always open to feedback from parents and other people to kind of keep everybody safe. And I know for a fact that those two buildings are doing a superb job, so I thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tina's not logged in.
Take a 5-minute
Yeah,
break.
good.
You want to take a break between these two?
That's,
That's
yeah, because
like
Eric's going to be
a
alone.
5-minute break,
Okay.
yeah.
Dr. Hassler, we're going to take a 5-minute break. Okay. Is that okay? Okay, so 5-minute break, please.
Thank you.
paper.
Oh,
Because there was nothing on
I
the
see
screen
what
there.
you're saying.
Good evening, we're back in session and no board business took place during the break. Moving on with the agenda, we have a presentation of the 2021-2022 instructional budget items given by Dr. Eric Hassler.
Thank you, everyone. So the budget that I'm going to be presenting is a snapshot at this exact moment in time. It's actually a snapshot of when the budget reports were printed and put into board docs. Already, even from the printing of those, there's been some things that have transpired, and I'll talk about some of those modifications. But before I get started, I just want to say thank you to everybody who was involved in the development of this budget. That's including all of our administrative team, all of the department chairs, Patrick, Mr. Cahill, and the business office, the accounting office, my colleagues. There's a lot of work that goes into the development of this because of the number of departments that are involved. So thank you very much to everybody who's been involved in that process. So the first line that I'm going to present on is the core programs, which is including instruction at the kindergarten and first grade level, our language arts department, our English department, the math department, the science department, and the social studies department. Core programs consist with costs that are associated with the instruction in each of these departments, including textbooks, supplies, workbooks, manipulatives, dues and publications, and it's basically the costs associated with the core instruction for nearly 7,000 students within the Monroe-Woodbury School District. The fluctuations that you see in the budget for this year are due to basically a zero-based budgeting approach that we use on an annual basis, where many of the costs associated with this are per pupil multipliers, where you're talking about textbooks or workbooks or materials or manipulatives. And in this particular year, if there are unused workbooks, for example, those workbooks roll over into the following year, and we are able to record that as a savings. The science department specifically, I want to draw your attention to that reduction. That reduction is due to a textbook that was in this current year's budget that was purchased using this year's funds that no longer needs to be in that budget, so we were able to reduce that. Overall, this budget, this particular code is going down a little over $24,000, which is just over 4%. The next series of codes are also inclusive of core program, district-wide programs, which includes health education, art, music, the LOTE, which is our world language department, family and consumer science, technology, and gifted and talented. Health education is for the K-12 health program, which includes textbooks, CPR workbooks, first aid workbooks for the Red Cross, membership for various New York State Professional Health Educators Associations, and elementary texts with regards to the health program in nutrition and health exercises. The art code is for art supplies, which is primarily made up of various consumable items. The increase this year, the $10,700 increase, is due to the addition of a professional development program that we are planning for through the Sullivan BOCES Arts and Education COSER, which means that by participating in that program, we get BOCES aid back on that program. So that's something that the K-12 art department is going to be able to access. The slight increase in the music department this year is we every year have a replacement program for various pieces of equipment in the music department. This year we are planning to invest in a number of different tubas in a few buildings across the school district. Our world language department has a slight increase for some supplies. The $4,700 increase in family and consumer science is due to a textbook that is going to be purchased at the middle school and at the high school level. The technology department is our, many of you may know it as tech. That's what the students often refer to it as. That budget is consistent with this current year's budget. The Gifted and Talented Department includes the Gifted and Talented Expand program that exists at the 2-5 and middle school level. In addition, it includes necessary materials for other programs such as Odyssey of the Mind. That program also is going to maintain its current budget for the school year. Just a reminder, as I said, the previous slide and the current slide include textbooks where we have a certain amount of state aid that's allocated to us on an annual basis. That's usually in the range of about $500,000. Basically, what that means is we are allowed to have about approximately $500,000 worth of expenditures in the form of textbooks, which is one-to-one aid that if we spend that money, we get it reimbursed to us in the following school year. So many of the fluctuations that you see in the various textbook lines are the result of the ebb and flow of textbooks being purchased in various departments, and we kind of have a rolling replacement of those various textbooks.
I have a question.
Sure.
Before you move on. Can you go over the difference for the art department? You mentioned something with the BOCES closer.
Sure. So the program specifically is called the...
Oh, it's a new program?
It's a professional development for the staff that we get through and the program is called the Art of Education University, and it's a series of online professional development opportunities for staff. The reason why they accessed it, they started using it a little bit this year and into next year, is the shift from in-person art instruction to an online format, the way that we did at the end of last year and this year, has been a pretty major overhaul in a lot of our different art programs, going from traditional in-person physical art classes to remote classes. So they have a pretty robust series of in-service courses and opportunities for the art department teachers to be able to participate in using the various materials that they use in the classroom, but also shifting that to an online format. So the cost of that program, because it comes through the Sullivan BOCES Arts and Education Program, is available for BOCES Aid through the COSER.
Have we explored anything that would be available to the technology department as well?
The technology department, sure. I mean, the way that the PD works in the technology department, though, is usually when our tech department invests in, and an example might be, in recent years, we started a drone program in some of the technology classes. In those cases, the resources that we use for those programs also come associated with professional development. So when our staff go out and they're deciding that they're going to invest in, some 3D printers, say, for example, that purchase and dealing with the manufacturer usually comes with professional development associated with it for them to be able to use the equipment or the software. In this case, there's no real direct software that's involved. It's more of how do they take some of their traditional classroom techniques and shift them to online.
Well, I understand.
Yep.
I was asking specifically because it also relates to tech. They've had to do the same as well.
Yep.
Right. So, and I was actually going to ask it previously when we were talking about reopening, if there's been adaptations that will take place that allow for now the tech who went completely virtual to reformat everything to be now back in their classroom, right?
Yeah, and a lot of that shift is going to depend on, and one of the things that we didn't speak about was the classes that are going to have to continue to be live streamed and the classes that now have the full cohort of students that are going to be returning fully in person. And so it's going to really vary from class to class depending upon the number of students that are going to be returning, because we also, as Mrs. Rodriguez had mentioned in the reopening plan, the number of students that are going to be returning in person is greater than our current number of remote-only students. So we have a higher number of remote-only kids that are going to be returned to the classroom. And it may be challenging to be able to maintain some of those fully remote classes that we've previously had. Some of the classes are going to have to become, blended classes where there are in-person kids and streaming kids. But it's going to depend upon the course and how many kids are going to be returning.
Challenging for the staff because now they have to configure their class from the two perspectives.
Correct. And some of those conversations are happening as we speak now at the elementary, for example, where a parent may say, my child is in a fully remote class right now, and I would like them to return to in-person, or I would like my child in this fully remote class to remain fully remote. But because there are so many kids that may want to return to in-person, now that class, the teacher that has previously been teaching to an entire class online is now going to have some students that are going to be in-person and some students that are going to be continued remote. So there are going to have to be some changes in format and how instruction is provided.
And you'll be looking at those on a case-by-case basis?
Yeah, and that's unfortunately, that's the reason why that Google form that we asked parents to complete was so important, because we really needed every single parent to respond to that Google form, so that way we knew how many desks to put in the classroom, and we could have we couldn't just do it overnight. we need to be able to prepare for that, so that way the teachers know what the format is going to be for them when, we get to April 12th and April 19th for the kids to
Right,
return.
again, I go back to tech, there'll definitely be kids now who are in the classroom who are using one modality, and the kids at home are using something different, they can be
Yep.
able to bridge those two?
Yep. And we're talking about a variety of different options. There are things that kids are who in the fall, because the fall semester, some of our classes are semester courses. So the experience that kids that may have taken a course in the fall when they were like fully remote, or even if they were hybrid and they were only in school 2 days a week, is now going to be a little bit different than some of the kids that are taking it during the spring semester. So we're looking at a lot of different ways to try to be able to accommodate for that.
Sorry.
The next line is physical education and athletics. The physical education line is for the in-school K-12 physical education program that includes the purchasing and maintaining of all of our various PE equipment and supplies across the school district. The interscholastic line is for our interscholastic athletic program, which includes fees associated with the participation in all of our interscholastic athletic competitions, Section 9 league fees, the Orange County Interscholastic Athletic Association fees, travel for the various coaches, as well as maintaining fitness equipment and officiating. That $6,700 increase in that line is for the upkeep and maintenance of some of our weight room equipment that we're planning for the following school year. So that's what that slight increase is attributed to. The next program falls under the category of special secondary programs, which is our business and career education program. These programs are specific to the high school. The costs include various dues and publications for our business department, as well as study guides and consumable text for our business law classes, Occupational Outlook Quarterly for our career ed program. The reduction is due to items in the supply line that are not going to be needed because of the rollover into the 2021 school year. And student activities line the budget is remaining the same. The student activities are for funds in students in grades 6 through 12, and these costs are associated with activities such as various assemblies for students, various ceremonies that we have across the school district, such as honor society, induction ceremonies, and things like that, as well as student publications.
So how does that get allocated to the schools?
If you look, all of these lines, I'm going at this from like a program code. Each of them, there's a middle school line and a high school line accordingly. So like if you looked at the report in WinCap, I'm sort of given the overall function total, but within them is the breakdown of all of the different allocations by building. The next series of lines fall under the category of instructional support by building. Instructional support represents the costs that are associated with the actual operation of the 7 school buildings. $3,200 is the principal supervision line, which includes dues and publications for the administration of the buildings, their various travel allowances, conferences that they may attend. At the secondary level, it includes costs associated with graduation and moving up ceremonies. The increase in this line this year is attributed to the increase in paper supplies and printing costs that is underneath the principal's budget. The next line is general supplies, which included, past tense, the maintenance of contracted equipment. You may recall that Dr. Vias, in his presentation at the last Board of Education meeting, reported that there was an increase in the consolidation of the copier contract, and that is falling underneath the umbrella of the MCC now. Previously, that was budgeted individually by building. There was individual contracts by building. So the increase, that $251,000, decrease, is the removal of those individual rental and equipment lines at the building level that is now under the umbrella of the microcomputer center. The remaining items in that line include building level furniture and equipment purchases, as well as general supplies for the building. Each of the buildings, similar to the discussion about the special secondary, the student activities accounts, you can see within the WinCap what the breakdown is by building of all the various supply codes. The final line is conferences and meetings, which is professional development for the staff that is also broken out by building, and that line is remaining flat from the 2021 school year to next year.
Do you want me to hold all my questions?
It's up to you. I can take them as they come.
Well, I was just thinking about, there was a conversation about additional monies into the clubs, being able to fund them in some way. Has that been considered for this budget cycle?
What do you mean, clubs?
As far as club money being allocated to, say, the art club or multicultural club, where there's stipend, but there's no monies given to the clubs.
Right.
Have we considered that?
We haven't, are you talking about like the funding of the extra classroom clubs? At this moment in time, no. And I think part of the piece of that is, I think you had mentioned that extracurriculars is one of the, like after-school programs and things like that was something that's under the umbrella of the,
Okay, good.
so before, all of that kind of plays out, we need to see what the allocation is that is going to be able to be used for that as well.
Great. And field trips have been taken out for next?
No, field trips are in there. Field trips are in there. The next category is education support services, which covers costs associated with both our education support services department as well as our instructional support services departments. These are costs associated with conferences, publications, and the maintenance of various forms of equipment, machines for scanning standardized assessments in the school district. It also covers costs for our academic intervention program as well as our English language learners program, and the administrative costs associated with each of these various programs. The reduction in the administration line, the Education Support Services Department it falls under the umbrella of also the Technology Department. So the $6,000 in administrative fees is now going to be taken on by Dr. VS's department as well. The one increase that's in there, the academic intervention services line remains consistent, as well as the ELL line for next year. The increase in parochial text is due to the increase in requests from non-public schools to access similar to what we were talking about earlier, funding for the purchase of textbooks. There's an allotment that each student is allowed to have. That parochial text budget is inclusive of the $500,000 textbook aid line and state aid credit that I was referring to earlier. The next category is instructional management. The instructional management line is various costs that are associated with the management of some of our scoring of standardized assessments. However, the bulk of that line has been removed from, previously it was approximately $175,000. We've reduced that line, and the $175,000 has now been placed in a BOCES line, because a few years ago we were able to start contracting with Orange Ulster BOCES for the scoring of our standardized assessments. The benefit of that is that it was previously something that was solely taken out of the general fund, but now by contracting through Orange Ulster BOCES, it allows us to be able to access BOCES aid on that. So that now falls underneath a BOCES line. The community services line, it shows an increase from $0 to $8,300. Last year, when I did this presentation, the costs associated with summer enrichment were in there, but when the decision was made not to have summer enrichment last summer because of COVID, the line was reduced down to $0. Right now, there's an $8,300 placeholder, but summer enrichment is still on hold in terms of what, we're not exactly sure what we're going to be able to offer. So right now, there's a placeholder in the budget, but there's a high likelihood that program may not necessarily be able to run as well. The final line in there is curriculum development, which are costs largely attributed to BOCES services that we get for professional development for various things such as critical incident stress management and lead evaluator training for all of our administrators to be able to conduct staff evaluations. The final line is special education and PPS. Underneath the umbrella of special education and PPS is the district-wide tuition for foster children, which are all tuition costs paid to other public school districts for students that may have originated in Monroe-Woodbury as foster students, but now might be placed by foster care in other school districts, where we are still, as the district of origin, required to be able to provide the tuition for that student, even if they attend a different school district. The next line is for the Committee on Special Education, which include costs associated for providing services to students with special needs, including professional development, travel costs for shared staff throughout the school district, as well as travel for staff that we send to students that might be homebound. It's various fees for evaluations that we are not able to conduct within the school district, and we might have to contract outside the school district to conduct those evaluations. There's also some various material and equipment costs that are in there that we might need in order to be able to provide to support for our students. The next line is the PPS administration costs, which includes costs for running the actual special education and PPS services departments, which includes paper costs, supplies, postage. The 6,600 line is the miscellaneous expenses for home instruction, which includes costs associated with providing instruction for students that are, possibly spending a time period in a hospitalized environment or a residential environment that are awaiting another out-of-district placement. We're still obligated to provide instruction to those students. The next line is the OCED BOCES line, which include costs for the tuition costs for students that attend the CTEC, the Career and Technical Education Program at Orange Ulster BOCES, and we are maintaining the same number of seats budgeted within that line, so that line is remaining the same. The district-wide guidance line are costs associated with our guidance department, including postage for transcripts and college applications, running our various career and job fairs in the school district, supplies for the guidance department, as well as some software costs. The next line is the health services code, which include costs and fees associated with our nurses and our health offices. This includes different types of equipment that we might have to maintain or rent in the school district, various professional fees and BOCES fees that are taken out of this line, as well as all of the supply costs that are needed for running our health offices that, that our students go to in the event that they need support from our nurses. The final series of lines are the 7,400, 7,500, and 7,600 special education tuition lines. Last year when I gave this presentation, those lines were in one overarching line, which was the high-cost tuition line, the 7,500 line. We now have broken that line out into a number of different categories. Overall, the budget is being proposed as a $15,480,000 budget for next year. The current budget, the 2021 budget, is $13,957,000. I went back last year and I looked at the presentation, this presentation that I did, and I realized that having one budget line for that line, I went into a long discussion and gave a lot of figures and numbers without giving any sort of actual visual explanation of what I was speaking about. So this year what we did was we broke those costs down into three separate categories. Previously, the high-cost tuition line was one overarching line. Now, if you looked at it in your WinCap reports, the line is broken down into three separate categories: the tuition non-resident line, the tuition resident line, and the tuition chapter students line. The reason why we broke it out into three categories is because they service different populations of students. The tuition non-resident line includes tuition costs associated with providing services to students that do not reside within the Monroe-Woodbury School District, but attend non-public schools within our boundaries. Because we are the district of location of these schools, we still have an obligation to provide special education services to students with individualized education programs in those schools. However, the reason why we separated that line into its own line is because those students that receive those services are not Monroe-Woodbury residents, we bill back those services to their district of residence. So if there is, say, we have St. Paul's in Monroe-Woodbury, but if a student from Washingtonville attends St. Paul's in Monroe-Woodbury and gets services from our school district, we then bill back Washingtonville for those services, even though we are the service provider of those services in that particular school. So that's one category. So that category, that $722,000, is reimbursed to the school district through billing of other school districts. The reason why I have a zero in there under the adopted budget is because if you go back to last year's budget, the 7,400 line does not exist. And if you look at your report in WinCap, it appears as if that number came out of nowhere. it didn't. It was embedded within the 7,500 line, which I'll show you how that looked in a minute. The next line is the tuition residence line, which includes tuition costs associated with providing services to students with IEPs that reside in Monroe-Woodbury but attend various out-of-district programs, which includes various BOCES programs, Orange, Ulster, Rockland, Putnam, Northern Westchester, Southern Westchester, BOCES, as well as other public and approved private programs such as Center for Discovery or the Summit School. As these services are provided to resident students, the district is responsible for the full costs. However, we do receive high-cost aid for many of these services. The vast majority, as you can see, the vast majority of our tuition budget comes from this particular line.
I'm sorry, I just have a quick question.
Sure, sure.
Does any of that include a transportation component to it?
No.
Okay.
No, that falls underneath the transportation
Okay.
budget.
So Eric, if you look at the numbers, you have the total budget in this code was 14 million last year.
Yep.
And the resident program is over 14 million this year. So it would, either that program grew a lot or our costs grew a lot.
Yep, I'm going to show you, I have another chart in a minute that I'm going to show you that shows what the actual increases are within each of these lines. Because if you looked at it purely from your WinCap reports, it doesn't give you an accurate year-to-year comparison because the 7,400 and 7,600 lines didn't exist. They were embedded in 7,500. So it will look like the 7,500 line didn't go up very much, but in actuality, there's growth there from year to year, and I want to show you where that growth is going to fall. So I'm gonna get there. The final category that was previously built into the 7,500 budget line is the tuition chapter students line, which include costs of students that are placed in group homes that are within the boundaries of Monroe-Woodbury. Similar to the tuition for non-resident students, we're responsible for providing services for these students. However, the expenses that are associated with students that are serviced within this line are fully reimbursable to the school district. So the 7,400 and the 7,600 lines are fully reimbursable to the school district. And that's the reason why we wanted to separate those out, is to be able to show how each of those, there's different revenue streams for each of those individual lines. So this is the chart that I was referring to help kind of outline what the growth would have been.
Okay.
If you looked at the tuition non-resident line in our current year budget, the budget is $654,336. Again, right now that's in the 7,500 line. What we're projecting in breaking that budget out is that budget is going to be going up by $68,000 to $722,000. But again, that $68,000 increase is reimbursed to the school district in the form of billing the district of residence of the students in that line. The bulk of the increase in the tuition line is still coming from the 7,500 line under resident students. That increase is overall $1.1 million. A portion of that increase, that $1.1 million, is attributed to the projected increase of tuition costs. It doesn't have anything to do with an increase in the number of students. We budget roughly a 4% increase. If a student attends Orange, Ulster, BOCES, we build in a 4% increase in tuition costs into that based upon the projected increase in the following school year. In addition to that, we have an increase in the chapter students, which were previously in the 7,500 line. That line, if you looked at it within the 7,500 code this year, would have been $252,000, and we're projecting that line going up to $602,000 for the 2021 school year. Again, however, students that are serviced within that budget line are fully reimbursed in the following school year in the form of aid. Now, overall, that $1.5 million increase is attributed to three main factors. One of them is that 4% budget-to-budget increase in tuition costs that we project. The other piece of that is attributed to the increase in students that we have to service. One of them is we build in a number of placeholders into the budget the following year for students that are not currently in the budget. For example, we provide preschool services to students that reside within the Monroe-Woodbury School District. We know going into the 21-22 school year that there are a number of students who are going to be enrolling in kindergarten who are going to require an out-of-district placement. So what we do is, as we know that those students who are currently enrolled receiving CPSC services from the school district are going to be enrolling in kindergarten next year, we put into the budget their tuition costs because we know that we're going to be absorbing them this year, so that way it's not something that we're looking for, transfers into that account because we have a shortfall. That's number one was the 4% increase in tuition. Number two was the projecting for students that we know exist. The other piece of that is accommodating for students that we don't necessarily anticipate. For example, the increase in the chapter student line from 252,000 to 602,000, there were additional students that enrolled in that moved into those group homes that I was referring to. They moved in last year. They were not part of the budget for this current year, so we need to make sure that we are now including them in next year's budget. So those are the three phenomenons: projecting for kids that we know are going to go into out-of-district placements, bringing the budget up to the level of servicing students that we know we already have in Monroe-Woodbury that we have to provide services to, as well as appropriately budgeting for possible increases in tuition costs. So in the end, that's the reason why, if you looked at the 7,500 line from last year, that total 7,500 line would have been that $14 million, Mr. Beeler, that you were speaking about. So overall, the budget is increasing by 1.522 into the 21-22 school year.
Most of the increase that we care about, half of it is due to an increase in tuition.
Right.
And approximately half of it is attributed to additional services or additional students.
Correct.
in the
So,
program.
so of that $1.1 million in the 7,500 line, about $873,000 is an increase specific to BOCES. Of that $873,000, a little under $400,000 is just projected tuition increases. There are some additional students that we're budgeting for,
Yep.
but just of that, it's just about $400,000 of that increase is purely attributed to us projecting an increase in tuition costs for next year.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah, going back a few pages, you talked about we have to pay for students who are residents of our district but are in foster care in other districts.
Correct.
Do we get reimbursed if that scenario was reversed? In other words, let's say we had a kid from Washingtonville who's attending our school because they're in foster care in Monroe-Woodbury.
That's a good question.
Yeah, we would bill the district of origin or residence.
Right.
Okay.
So districts are constantly billing each other.
Constantly billing each
For health
other, is that right?
services.
Is that the
for tuition.
7,400 code?
There are actually two 7,400 codes. Hold on one second. Because there's two categories. It's in WinCap, it's considered regular school under the 2110 Curriculum and Instruction Code, and then there's a 2250 code, which is under the Special Education PPS line. So the 7,400 actually falls under the 2110 Curriculum and Instruction Code. The 7,400 for tuition non-resident falls under the 2250 Special Education PPS code.
And the chapter students, that's a pure increase in students in that program, or did that come from someplace else?
So usually students that are placed in those particular programs are placed in there by a state agency.
Okay.
So that's not something that's within our control. That's something that a group, there may be a certified group home within our school
Twice,
district.
it went up by double, so, well, triple, well,
Yeah,
pretty close, 2.5. So you're saying that the state's putting more kids into homes in our district,
that's correct.
but they're paying for it?
Correct.
Okay. Apparently, they're doubling, or 2.5 times the number of people in group homes in our
Correct.
district.
And you can see, again, last year when I presented just the one tuition line, it's a very nebulous line. And now we're trying to, in addition to trying to explain what that increase is looking like and why it's happening, but also having it make more sense when it's within WinCap based upon the benefit is next year when I do this presentation, I won't have to do this.
So is that instruction?
I won't have to do this
Is that
again.
instruction BOCES, or is that in-house, in-district?
Which one?
Chapter?
No, it's sending them out into various other placements. If they have to go to any other out-of-district placement, whatever the costs are associated with that placement, the reimbursement comes back to the school district.
Okay.
It depends upon the needs of the student when they.
I understand. The reason for my question is I wanted to understand if we were building up internal resources, that if this number fluctuates like 2.5 times in a year, if it went the other way, would we be stuck with services that we had built?
No, all of the students that fall in the 7,600 category are receiving out-of-district services.
Yeah.
Yep.
Where do you see the reimbursements? For the non-resident and the chapter students?
Pick that right over.
The only thing I would say with the chapter students, the reimbursements would come from the district of origin typically, right? So in many cases, that increase is attributed to students originally from New York City. And I'll just say, if everything is working according to Hoyle, we're reimbursed, no big deal. But it doesn't always work seamlessly or, effortlessly. We've worked pretty hard, because that number has gone up so much, to aggressively seek out these reimbursements. And dealing with New York City, there's often, bureaucratic resistance, if you will. And we've had to work with the state agency, the Office for People,
OPWDD, yep.
State agency that places these students. And we've had a lot of conference calls, and they were somewhat resistant to it, but we've pushed because the monies are big. And so we're making a lot.
And we're
headway.
entitled to it.
And we're entitled to it. And I mean, that was the nature of the conversation.
No, that was why I was asking, because when you see a category jump that big, I wanted to just make sure that we were getting reimbursed, number one, and two, longer term, I'm sure by
we are
staying
Don,
after them for getting paid,
I
they
think
might put fewer in our district.
I think one of the things that we've done very well is have accurate information. And so I know that we've had communications with people in New York City to say, here is what you owe us. And if that doesn't get rectified, then there's another step, there's another avenue for us.
Right.
We've had several conversations with because one of the holdups, I don't want to get too granular here, was these children were placed by the state, and the state needed to provide us with information that we could give to New York City that said, here's the placement, you're the district of origin, all the paperwork is in order, and the state wasn't providing that. And they were saying, well, it's been 2 years, we don't know, we don't have it anymore. And it was, it was kind of ludicrous. And so we really had to press them.
And that actually ties back into the question that Mrs. Donahue asked earlier, because the process is actually very similar to foster care students, that when a student is registered in the school district, we get a form from the agency saying whether this is now the student's new district of residence, or whether the student's residence is going to be the previous school district, and that's now going to be considered the district of origin, which is very significant because if we're dubbed the district of residence, we're now responsible for the cost of that. If we are the district of location, we have the ability to bill back to that district of origin. So that process that Patrick is talking about is very significant.
And it was the Office for People with Developmental Disabilities is the state agency. I couldn't think of the name. I just know OPWDD. So that's the agency that we've been dealing with, and that's the agency that's been placing some of these students.
It'll be interesting to see if the trend continues after you push back on getting paid.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Question. All right, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Moving on, do we have any discussion for the student calendar?
When you put it up, I'll talk. Do you want me to talk
Okay,
about it now?
do you want
or
to do that? Yeah.
So this year's calendar, I just want to share with everyone that it is about a month late. And the reason being is that the districts, the component districts in Orange County adopt their calendar after BOCES has adopted their calendar, and they adopted their calendar just a couple of weeks ago. And one of the reasons that they were delayed was that they were waiting for testing dates And we were also waiting for some information, some clarification on snow days. This year, there was an opportunity for school districts if they chose to be remote. And we were hoping that the state would give us clarification moving forward. Unfortunately, they did not give us that clarification, so we did get our testing dates, but we didn't get the answer to that question. This calendar is unique because it's going to be the first time that our teachers will be working, having 2 superintendent conference days in August. So August 30th and August 31st, our teachers will come in and they'll have their superintendent conference day, and the first day of school will be September 1. The other thing I wanted to point out about the calendar this year is that we have continued on this year with our February break. So we'll have a February break once again this year, the 21st through the 25th.
Okay. Thank you. So may I have a motion to adopt and approve the 2021-2022 student calendar?
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And can you just clarify when, because I know there's a lot of questions in the community, when will this officially be posted? Will it be posted now tomorrow since we officially adopted it?
Yes, and
Okay.
remember that we still have, we still have to fill in the calendar with parent-teacher conferences and all those other dates, but
Correct.
this is the calendar we're going to work from. So
Okay.
the word draft will be taken off and then it's posted.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Next on the agenda is a resolution related to the 2019-2020 internal audit. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Monroe-Woodbury Central School District hereby accepts the 2019-2020 internal audit report and risk assessment developed by Cooper Arias LLP and corrective action plan created by district administration in response to internal audit findings. We did just have an audit meeting the other day to discuss this. I don't know if Patrick or Don want to add anything to it as far as discussion before we motion?
One thing that I do want to comment is the outstanding job that Tanya, Patrick, and the whole team did on going through all of this. It's really, really encouraging. The staff in the finance area have such a phenomenal handle on the finances and the audit functions in the school. It's very, very comforting when you look at the work that they're doing. It's really, really impressive.
Thank you, Don.
Agreed.
The only thing I would add is the internal audit area was free and reduced price lunch processing. And I just wanted to point out that so they look at the claims, they look at, the entire process, how the processing of the applications is done. There's a verification piece of that where you actually have to go back and sample the applications that you've approved and verify the income and things. And there were no findings. So in other words, everything they looked at was in order and perfect. And I'd just like to thank Aldous and his staff for the job they're doing in managing that component of the school lunch fund, because that's one piece of, the big operation.
Okay, thank you. If there's no other discussion, may I have a motion?
Motion.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion?
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Committee reports, I'll start with policy. We have our next meeting for policy on April 6th. I just said that we had an audit meeting. Don, can you just remind me, we have one coming up, but not for a couple of months, correct?
Correct. Yeah, we
Yeah.
just had one.
So we just had that, so we'll have another one in a couple of months. Facilities?
We have a lot to report, I think, and at least some important things to report
Yes.
in facilities.
I'll pass it to
So,
Patrick.
yeah, I'll let Patrick go through the details.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. I mean, the first thing I just wanted to touch on was the testing of water for lead that started recently. And so this is a requirement by public school districts. Every 5 years, we have to test the water in our buildings, every outlet with potable water.
I'm having a hard time hearing you, Patrick.
Okay, I'll take the mask off. Sorry. So every 5 years, we have to test all the outlets in our school buildings for, test the water for lead. And so we've started that process. I think we've tested all the buildings and gotten the results for 3 of the buildings. Sapphire, North Main, and Pine Tree. Some of the levels of the outlets were above the threshold, which I think is 15 parts per billion. We're attributing a lot of that just to the fact that the buildings have been idle and/or sort of underutilized, the water systems, for a while now. And so we're going to begin the remediation process. That process can be flushing the system. Water that sits in the pipes tends to leach the pipe and the solder a little bit more. We've put up signage for the outlets that did not pass, and sometimes we turn the water off or cover those. We're distributing bottled water or water in water coolers in all those buildings, so students and staff can have an alternative to the fountains and the water in the building where the outlets didn't pass. Ultimately, what happens is we would, if we're able to, if it's appropriate, replace fixtures and aerators on all the outlets and then retest. And hopefully, the steps we've taken to mitigate that will correct the problem, and the lead levels will be at the acceptable levels. I mean, if that's not the case, the next step would be to install filters and/or continue to use bottled water. I mean, we went through not the same, but a similar process last time we did this. There were certain fixtures which were above the threshold, not to the magnitude that we're seeing now. So we strongly believe that it's because the buildings have been, idle and underutilized, the water systems.
It's a common problem when
Yes, it is.
when they're idle.
It is. So
it always goes up.
So that's the update on the lead testing. The other thing that's sort of good news that I want to report on is the field, the condition of the synthetic turf field and the track. So we've gotten some numbers back from the original contractors on those. And the track repair, we just actually received the quote today, was $8,750, well below the 500,000 that was reported in the newspaper some weeks ago. And the repair to the turf field is a little bit of a range. Could be as low as 7,500 and up to about 20,000, depending on, there are these sleeves which are in the field which hold a post for netting, and some of those were damaged. So it depends on how many of those need to be repaired in sort of a different way, a more extensive way, invasive way, where we take that out of the ground and reinstall. So we'll know that when the contractor comes on site, and we're just trying to move that along as quickly as possible. So again, it's not hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's somewhere between, I would say, 16 to, let's say, 30,000 would be the total cost for both fixes. Yes.
Patrick, is any of that covered by insurance?
Yes, it would be. And we've initiated that claim. We talked about that. There's a deductible, but the balance would be covered.
It's good news.
Yeah, so that is good news. We're going to try to get that rolling as soon as we can.
Do
So
we have an idea, Patrick, when we're going to start that?
not exactly, but things are happening almost in real time. We got the quote like this afternoon, and I know Andre and Lori, we're working together today to see if we could do something as soon as Friday for the turf field. They have availability. We say, just come in, let's get it going, do it. And the track, as I mentioned, would be a two-step process where they do the temporary repair and then they come back later. But that would be another thing. We're trying to push to do that before track season starts, so.
But, I mean, it has not stopped us from playing football. So in case anyone
Correct.
has missed it, we have been playing on the turf field with no issues, right?
Exactly. Yep, that's true.
Okay, thank you. And Dawn, any update for visitation?
No, not since we last met.
Okay. And any update with Oxpa, as long as I have you here, but
So I believe it's tonight.
tonight, yeah.
So I missed it, but I think there's another, is there a presentation on the 7th?
On April 7th.
Yeah.
And then they have their meeting on the 8th.
So depending on where we're scheduled here, I will attend and update.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Report by student representative, Emily?
So good evening, everyone. Tonight I'm just going to share some updates regarding the meetings I've been having with the schools in the district. I've already shared that I met with the Pine Tree kids at the last board meeting. On March 12th, I met with students from both Central Valley Elementary and North Main Elementary. Today, I had the opportunity to join the middle school's Crusader Council and talk with both the advisors and the students. With the elementary schools, everything that was said pretty much echoed the thoughts of the Pine Tree students. Online, students felt like there was a lack of participation and a lack of socializing with friends. However, some students like the flexibility with a hybrid model. The students at Central Valley and North Main really embraced the pros and cons with the online and hybrid model, and I was able to see their maturity and how they were dealing with the situation. It's safe to say that most of the elementary school students prefer going in 5 days a week and are really excited, and I'm also excited for them too to return. I sincerely applaud the elementary schools students for being so strong, and it's no doubt the result of the awesome work that Mr. Bro and Mr. Cotto and the teachers of the elementary schools have put in. However, meeting with the middle school today made me realize that as I met with the kids in the older grades, choosing to go in 5 days a week made them a little hesitant. There are multiple factors I observed that led to this division between student sentiments on this issue. For example, the issue of mental health and stress. It's been fairly evident that the older kids were more vocal about the stresses of schoolwork right now. The middle schoolers shared with me, and I quote verbatim, that the idea of going back 5 days a week, although exciting, was overwhelming, and that the thought of so many kids going into school will only make more kids infected, and that's scary for them. One kid openly shared that he's not a fan of this model and that he would have much preferred having an asynchronous Monday with 4 days a week in school. In the middle school and in Central Valley and North Main as well, there was a common consensus that the loss of asynchronous Mondays have only been a negative impact, if any, and this comes from teachers as well. It was a day to mentally prepare and catch up for the school week ahead. But I'm not expecting this viewpoint to change the model we're going into. I just wanted to share these thoughts of the students that I met with. I'm sure that as we get used to the 5 days a week model, we'll grow to appreciate the extra time we get to spend in class because the school year is ending really fast. But going back to the issue of stress and going back to school, I know this mainly only impacts the students in middle school and above, but students hope that the teachers will still be flexible and lenient with the deadlines and schoolwork as we go back. I'd like to thank Mr. Lark, Mrs. Ahern, and Mrs. Montalvo for allowing me to meet with the Crusader Council today. I want to end my report by talking about the future plans I have for Essential Prep. It's unclear whether or not the tutors will decide to host a third program. With finals approaching, we find it unsuitable for both the tutors and the students who will join the program to be overwhelmed by studying for school and test prep. However, I hope that all the work I've put into this program isn't lost and that its legacy can be continued. We are in the process of looking for upcoming seniors to lead the program. I'm currently working on the Google Form application to hopefully be sent out soon. It's almost done. So the tutors and I had a meeting on Tuesday to talk about the best way to go about finding the new student leaders of Essential Prep. We put a lot of thought into the most fair way to assess if a student is a good fit for our program. And we hope that we receive a decent amount of applications to take over for the 2021 to 2022 school year. From those applications, we plan to interview the most fitting candidates and start training them before we all graduate. We will be looking for a new executive director and new tutors, as well as tutors who will be willing to take on the coordinating positions we had. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to Matt for personnel.
Thank you very much. A couple of things for personnel. First of all, we have 2 retirements. Both people who've been here a grand total of 31 years, so congratulations to our 2 retirees. There's also one thing I just want to point out under our classified appointments. We are hiring tonight a bilingual typist at the high school, and one of the things that she's in our attendance office. One of the things that we were able to do as a school district is, along with civil services, to create a position of having a bilingual typist. It helps us in terms of our growing need. We often find, depending on the building, that if we don't have somebody in an office who can speak another language, we can't get back to parents as timely as we'd like to. So this type of a position really helps us in terms of our flexibility in meeting the needs of our parents and students. So
That's a civil service exam for the bilingual?
it is. It's a regular typist exam. However, they have 1 year to demonstrate proficiency in whatever language we're choosing. So it's a good thing for our district. It's a very good thing, I believe. So with that, I would just respectfully request approval for the items under personnel.
May I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Patrick for business and financial.
So I would also respectfully request the approval of the items under business and financial section of the agenda.
Motion. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I just do want to note that we discussed it earlier, Patrick did in his presentation, but part of that is the change in our next meeting for the revised 2021-2022 budget calendar. So instead of meeting on Wednesday, April 7th, we are moving it to Wednesday, April 14th for budget reasons. Okay, thank you. May I have a motion to accept the items under committees on special education and preschool special education?
Motion.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Reports by board and central office. I'm not going to start with Sergey tonight. I'm going to go back to him. I'm going to start with Dawn.
I'm ready.
You want to go?
I can go. I'd like to thank the cabinet, the superintendent for presenting the plan for finally taking the kids back to school. This is very exciting. And would like to thank the cabinet for the enormous amount of work you guys done with the budget. I'm glad to see that there is a really strong team working for the benefit of this district. And I'd like to wish everybody happy holidays and have a great rest of the week.
Thank you. Dawn?
Yes, I also would like to thank the superintendent and the cabinet for all the work that you have been doing in leading the district to bringing our students and our community back to a place of normalcy. I'd like to recognize that it is, what I see as a very heavy lift to everybody in the community, and that everybody has done, gone above and beyond to pull together and do this for our students and our community, the administrators, and especially the staff, the teachers. I'd like to thank everybody for their presentations tonight. Welcome to the new hires, and congratulations on the retirees, and have a good night.
Thank you. Don?
Clearly, the biggest news is back to school. I mean, that sort of dwarfs everything else, but I also want to thank all of the work that's been done on the budget, and that sports are finally back in the district. I think we're getting that normalcy. At least we can see it in the not-too-distant future. So that's fantastic news, and I think the community will really appreciate opening the school back up. That one really does dwarf everything.
Thank you. Suzanne?
Yeah, I want to second what everyone else has been saying about how thrilled I am that the kids will be coming back to school. I also would like to thank all the presenters. The budget is a huge undertaking, and every year you guys come through, and you do a fantastic job. I'd also like to wish everyone happy holidays and great vacation, and to our teachers and students a very well-deserved vacation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm looking forward to the virtual concert on Friday. And everyone have a good evening.
Thank you. Emily, anything else?
I just want to say I'm really excited to go back to school 5 days a week. I at least get to end the year kind of normal, I guess. So that's really fun. And I hope that a lot of the clubs get to start meeting in person, and that maybe some of the music ensembles can have a real concert, before the school ends. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Donna?
I just wanted to remind anyone, if they're interested in running for the board, to contact me for a packet. I do need the nominating petitions by April 19th, if you would like to run. And I also wanted to say thank you to the high school for hosting us for these last meetings, and to the awesome custodial staff who I've probably driven slightly crazy in arranging all our meetings and rooms. So thank you to them, and happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you. Argov?
So last board meeting, we had a question come up about the online streaming and availability of the wireless camera. So we received the wireless camera last week, and we had started broadcasting various events. So last weekend, Thursday, and Friday, and Saturday, we had quite a few events that was broadcasted live, and we had about 3,300 plus viewers were able to watch these various games. And I know it's a huge undertaking, so I do want to thank Ms. Hawk, Mr. Vero, Mr. Kostansky, Ms. Benley, and Ms. Thurston, because it's behind-the-scene folks who are really working to make sure that this goes very smoothly. And ultimately, our parents can enjoy the present of their kids are working and playing hard. We are expecting the remaining 3 cameras in next couple of weeks, so once we have a full-blown process, this will be even better than what we currently have. And enjoy the spring break.
Thank you. Dr. Hassler?
I too want to thank the superintendent for her presentation about bringing kids back to school 5 days. I don't think I thank her enough offline, certainly not in public, but I mean, I know in the Hassler House, it's a really big deal as well, so thank you very much. There have been quite a few updates that have come out in the last week regarding state testing, particularly the 3 through 8 and the Regents exams. The school district is going to be coming out with a number of different communications out to parents about what those updates look like and how the school district is preparing them, so please be on the lookout for that in the upcoming days. Congratulations to 2 of our middle schoolers, Abhilash Patel and Jacob Cirello, who placed 2nd and 3rd in this year's Orange Ulster BOCES Spelling Bee. Like, shout out to them. Congratulations. And I'm looking forward to the concerts on Friday night. Again, if you haven't seen them, please log on and check those out. And I also agree, I was down on the fields yesterday. The weather was spectacular. I caught a part of a modified soccer game and the modified cross-country meet, and the fields were being used in full force, and it's just awesome, awesome, awesome to see, and I wish everybody a great spring break.
Thank you. Patrick?
Yeah, I guess I would just echo everything else that's been said. Have a nice spring break next week and a good evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, same thing. I do want to also shout out to the athletic department because the live streaming has been great, especially the local live net. But even when we don't have access to that, they've done a really nice job of giving parents access in other formats, which has been wonderful. Rest, relax, renew next week to all of our staff. It's a wonderful time of the year. Enjoy the holidays, everybody. Have a nice night.
Thank you. Anthony?
I'm echoing the same things. Thanks, everyone, for those great presentations. We know how much effort you put into it. Thank you, Superintendent, for opening the schools for 5 days a week. It's a fantastic thing. All the community and all the kids, all the parents are going to be really happy about that. And everyone gets some good, much-needed rest. Have a good evening and a good holiday.
Thank you. Dan?
I'm thrilled that we're going back 5 days. Is it too much to ask for 6? Or, other than that, I just want to wish everybody a very relaxing spring break. It's been a rough winter, and looking forward to a couple days sitting on the couch. Have a good night.
Awesome.
Thank you. Mrs. Rodriguez?
I wanted to touch on a couple of things. One of the things is just talk briefly about our honors program and our AP classes at the high school. I want to thank our families who have reached out to both Dr. Hassler and I and shared their questions as well as their recommendations. And I just want to assure them that this is a work in progress. We will take into consideration the information we gathered from our families and our staff, and we will finalize our plans in the weeks to come. The success of our students remain our top priority, and we will create a program that will maximize those opportunities. The other thing I wanted to mention was Light It Up Blue. It takes place on April 2nd this year, which is the same day as
April
World
9th.
Autism.
April 9th. We changed it to April 9th.
No, I know, but see, you're like ahead of me. I was going to say that. So the rest of the world is doing it on April 2nd. That's the official day. But we're going to be observing it April 9th because we're away on break. Light It Up Blue is a campaign dedicated to raising awareness on autism and was launched in 2010 by Autism Speaks. Autism Speaks is the world's largest autism science and advocacy organization. You can purchase a blue light at any of our schools, and we ask everyone to wear blue on Friday, April 9th. And with that, I just want to wish everybody a well-deserved spring break. Get some rest. Stay safe, because I need you to come back and not be sick and not get COVID. So wear your mask, kids. If you're watching, it's kind of late, but if you're watching, make sure you keep safe, because we are coming back 5 days, all day, starting April 12th.
Okay, thank you. I say the same. I mean, I know I'm thrilled. I did the same as Mrs. Rodriguez, that I was interviewed by one of the high schoolers for the newspaper, and I know that in my house, it's an exciting time. So we're definitely happy to be coming back to school 5 days. I want to thank, because I know behind the scenes, there's a lot that goes into that. So I appreciate that, and I say thank you to everyone who's had a part in getting this accomplished. Thank you for all the presentations. I mean, same thing. I know that we all sit up here, but there is a lot of staff behind the scenes that helps to get all of this together, and I appreciate that. I also echo about the athletics component. I think the live streaming has been phenomenal. To Don's point that unfortunately, if you can't attend, please visit our website, because I know Ms. Hawk and her team post the schedule for the entire week. So for any community member who's out there and just wants to see some of our talented high schoolers, by all means, check out our links that are posted on the athletic page by Ms. Hawk, and you can watch the games from the comfort of your own house. So I think that's great. So thank you so much for that. I also want to wish the retirees very well, and congrats to the new hires. And I also want to give a shout out to the high school for hosting us. I know it's a lot of work having us here. We definitely appreciate it. And I'm going to give a shout out tonight to either Carol or Prudence, whoever just updated the district calendar while we sit here.
Carol,
So,
she texted me.
so for all of you parents out there that are trying to plan your very well-deserved vacations of next year, the calendar is on the website as we speak. So with that, I wish everybody a great holiday and a relaxing week, and thank you so much. Motion to adjourn?
Motion.
All those in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned.